this last chapter, I talk about how the Bible gives us some great examples of people who were given the bigger glimpse of their life. One of those was Job, who, as we know, at the beginning had no idea the drama that was occurring around what was happening in his life. But at the end of the book, Job gets a world tour, and God shows him all of the different stories that he's involved in. And when Job comes back from that tour, he is healed by his shift in perspective. Suddenly he sees his story in the context of the bigger story, which is actually how all of us need to see our life. Another example from the Bible is Esther, and I tell her story here. She was a Jewish orphan who wasn't even raised by her parents. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai. But Esther also happened to be very, very beautiful. And so she got swept up in this contest because the king was going to choose a new queen and decided to get all the beautiful maidens all over the land to come to the palace and parade before him so that he could select one. It was actually the first recorded version of The Bachelor. You probably didn't know that. And so this king ended up, of all the beautiful maidens, picking Esther. So now this Jewish orphan finds herself queen. Now you would think the story ends there. That's where the movie ends, right? But that is where the story began for Esther. Because as she's there, she becomes aware of a plot that this very evil man who has the king's ear has developed to exterminate the Jews. He doesn't like that they don't bow before the king, because they only bow before God. And so he gets this king to sign this edict, and Mordecai finds out and starts fasting and praying at the gate. And Esther goes to him and says, "What's going on?" And he says, "You are the only one who can do something about this." And then he says this, most famous verse throughout the whole book. He says, "And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." In other words, Esther, you need to pull back and get the bigger view of your story. You didn't make yourself beautiful. You didn't cause the circumstances to make you the queen. All of those things happen potentially for what you need to do now that you're in that place. And suddenly Esther pulls back on her life and she gets the big view of her life. And I have a quote in my new book that says this: "With eyes of faith, we see our life as part of a much bigger story." That's what Esther saw. And of course, I'm not going to tell you what happens next. You have to read the book. Esther saw that she was part of a bigger story that was really God's story. And what she did and how she responded in her circumstances had an impact on a lot more people than her. And that's really what God's perspective does for us. And the 4 lenses help us access that perspective. So let's go over those lenses one more time. The big view lens is when you pull back and get the bigger picture of your life. The present view lens is exactly the opposite. It's when you pull in and really notice the things that are happening around you. The rear view lens is when you look back and remember all the things that God has done in the past and have confidence in what He'll do in the future. And the higher view lens is helping you see all that God wants you to see about your life. It is my prayer that with these lenses, you now feel equipped to live the one and only life that God has given you to live. We didn't get to choose. None of us got to choose the life we were given. We were just born. We were born at a certain time in history that we didn't get to choose. In a certain country that we didn't get to choose. With parents we didn't get to choose. With a color of skin that we didn't get to choose. With an economic condition that we didn't get to choose. All of those things were decided because God brought us here. But we get to choose every day how we're going to live with those things. And yes, sometimes we're going to wish for another life. But God says, can you stop wishing for another life and live the life that I have dreamed for you? Can you do that?